The entire Thanksgiving table went silent when my sister lifted her wine glass and smiled at me like she had been waiting all night to ruin my life. 20 people watched her stand: my cousins, my aunt, my grandmother, my mother's church friend, who wasn't even family but somehow always showed up when there was gossip to collect. Claire tapped her glass once, sharp. My father stopped carving the turkey. My mother didn't tell Claire to sit down. She didn't look confused. She didn't even blink. And that was the first moment I knew this wasn't an accident. Claire tilted her head and said, "Since we're all being grateful tonight, I think Maya should finally be grateful for the truth." My stomach dropped. Someone whispered, "Claire," but she kept smiling. Then she looked straight at me and announced, "Maya was adopted. Mom and Dad just never told her because they didn't think she could handle it." The room cracked open. Forks froze. Chairs shifted. My grandmother covered her mouth. I looked at my parents, waiting for shock, shame, anything. My dad only sighed and said, "Don't make a scene." My mother reached across the table like I was the embarrassment. "Maya," she warned, "not tonight, not tonight." After 22 years of lying. After letting my sister turn me into the family spectacle. After hiding the court file I had found 3 weeks earlier. The file that didn't just say I was adopted. It named someone else. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. For a second, nobody breathed. That was the part I still remember most clearly. Not Claire's voice. Not the way my father's hand tightened around the carving knife. Not even my mother's warning, cold and polished. Like she was correcting me for spilling wine instead of watching my entire life get peeled open in front of relatives. It was the silence. The kind that made every tiny sound feel cruel. The ice shifting in Uncle Mark's glass. The soft click of Claire setting her wine glass down. The scrape of my own fingernail against the edge of the tablecloth, because my hands had gone stiff, and I didn't know what else to do with them. I stared at my mother first. Diane Hallow sat at the head of the table in her cream sweater, pearls resting against her throat, one hand still extended toward me like she could press me back into obedience from 8 chairs away. She looked beautiful, composed. Embarrassed? Maybe. But not sorry, that was what hit me, not sorry. My father, Robert, lowered the carving knife beside the turkey and gave me that look he used whenever he needed me to shrink. The one that said, "You are making this worse." The one I had obeyed since childhood before I even understood what obedience was. "Maya," he said quietly. But quiet from my father had never meant gentle. "Take a breath." Across from me, Claire leaned back in her chair. She was 26, 3 years younger than me, but somehow the entire family had spent our lives treating her like the delicate one, and me like the durable one. Claire got softness. Claire got excuses. Claire got my mother's hand on her back, and my father's proud smile when she did something as simple as arriving on time. I got responsibility. I got corrected. I got told I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too intense, too hard to understand. And now she had just announced, in front of my grandmother, my cousins, my aunt, 2 in-laws, and a woman from my mother's church prayer circle, that I had been adopted, like it was a toast, like it was a party trick, like I was the only person at the table who hadn't been invited into the joke. My Aunt Lila's lips parted, but no words came out. My cousin Noah looked between me and Claire, his face pale, his fork still hovering over his plate. Grandma Elise had one hand pressed to her chest. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. And Marlene, my mother's church friend, was watching me with wide, hungry eyes. That hurt more than I expected, because family secrets are one kind of wound. But being displayed in front of someone who had no right to be there, no blood, no history, no love for me at all, made the shame feel staged. Prepared. Served with the turkey and cranberry sauce. I swallowed, but my throat didn't move right. "Who told you?" I asked Claire. My voice came out calm. Too calm. That frightened me more than crying would have. Claire blinked like she had expected me to crumble or shout. Her smile flickered for half a second before she found it again. "Oh, come on," she said, turning her palms up. "Don't make this about me." A laugh almost came out of me. Not because anything was funny, because there it was. The family rule, spoken perfectly. Claire could light the match. I would be blamed for the smoke. My mother's hand dropped back to the table. Her fingers curled around her napkin until the linen twisted. "This is a private family matter," she said. I looked around the table. "At Thanksgiving?" No one answered. My father's jaw tightened. "Maya," he said again, sharper now. There was a time when that tone would have worked instantly. I would have apologized without knowing what I had done wrong. I would have excused myself to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, come back smiling too hard, and spent the rest of the night helping my mother clear plates, while my own humiliation sat between us like another guest. But 3 weeks earlier, I had gone into the basement looking for my mother's antique serving platters. 3 weeks earlier, I had found the locked cabinet behind the Christmas boxes. 3 weeks earlier, I had seen my name on a folder. Not Maya Hallow, another name. A name I had never heard spoken in that house. And inside that folder were court documents, old attorney letters, and an original birth certificate that made my hands shake so badly. I had to sit on the basement floor between storage bins and breathe through my teeth. So no, not tonight, not again. Claire gave a small, wounded sigh as if my silence had somehow attacked her. I only said it because everyone deserves honesty, she said. And honestly, Maya, you act like mom and dad never did enough for you. My face went hot. There it was. Not just the secret, the lesson. They had not only hidden the truth from me, they had turned the truth into a debt. Something I was supposed to repay with silence, with gratitude, with public humiliation accepted politely. My mother leaned forward. Claire didn't mean to hurt you. I looked at her. Then why didn't you stop her? The question landed harder than I expected. Claire's eyes darted to our mother. My father pushed his chair back an inch. Grandma Elise whispered, Dion, just one word. But my mother flinched like it had cut her. That tiny flinch changed the room. Because until then, everyone thought the secret was that I was adopted. They didn't understand that adoption was only the surface, only the clean version, only the part my parents could explain if everyone agreed to keep their voices low and their faces sympathetic. My fingers moved to the pocket of my cardigan, where the folded copy had been burning against my side all evening. I had brought it because I knew something was coming. I didn't know Claire would do this. I didn't know my parents would let her. But I had known, from the way my mother checked my coat when I arrived, from the way my father asked if I had found anything unusual in the basement, from the way Claire had been smiling all night, that the Hallows were preparing to corner me before I cornered them. My father's voice dropped. Do not do this here. I looked at the faces around the table, the people who had watched me be exposed, the people who had waited for me to behave, the people who had heard my sister announce my life like gossip, then watched my parents blame me for bleeding. And slowly, I pulled the folded court page from my pocket. My mother stood so fast her chair hit the wall behind her. Maya, she said, and this time her voice broke. Put that away. The sound of my mother's chair hitting the wall made everyone jump. It wasn't loud enough to be dramatic. Not really. It was just wood striking plaster. A sharp crack in a room already stretched too thin. But it changed everything, because my mother never moved like that in front of company. Diane Hallow floated through rooms. She arranged herself. She corrected everyone else's volume, while keeping her own hands clean. She could destroy you with one sentence and still make it sound like she was, asking whether you wanted more coffee. But now she was standing behind her chair with both palms flat on the table, her pearls trembling against her throat. Put it away, she repeated. Not what is that, not where did you get that. Put it away. My fingers tightened around the folded page. Across the table, Claire's expression shifted in a way I had seen 1,000 times growing up. The second she realized she had walked into something bigger than she understood, she looked toward our parents, not with guilt, with expectation. Fix this. That had always been Claire's instinct. She could say the cruel thing, break the expensive thing, start the argument, twist the knife, and then turn her face toward mom and dad like a child waiting for someone to clean the floor. And they always did. They softened her edges. They translated her cruelty into anxiety. They made her consequences disappear before they ever touched her. But this time, my father didn't look at Claire, he looked at me. Maya, he said, and the warning in his voice was no longer hidden. You are upset. You are embarrassed. I understand that. But waving around private documents at dinner is not going to help anyone. Private documents. My adoption file. My original birth certificate. Letters about my life. Court records with my name printed in black ink, sealed away for 22 years behind old tax folders and boxes of Christmas lights. He called them private like they belonged to him. Something inside me pulled tight. You understand that I'm embarrassed? I asked. My voice shook on the last word, but I didn't stop. Claire made a small sound, almost a scoff. Well, you are making it embarrassing. No one laughed. That should have told her to stop. It didn't. She leaned forward, cheeks pink from wine and attention, her perfect hair falling over one shoulder. I mean, I'm sorry, but I don't know why you're acting like this is some attack. Mom and dad gave you everything, a house, a family, a name, a name. The word hit harder than she knew, because I had stared at the name I was born with under a bare basement bulb. I had traced it with my finger like touching it might wake up some buried version of me. A baby I had been, a person I had never been allowed to meet. Maya Vale, not Maya Hallow. For 29 years, I had thought the emptiness in me was a flaw. I thought everyone had blank spaces in their childhood. I thought maybe I was ungrateful for noticing how my mother's stories changed depending on who was in the room. How my father always interrupted when doctors asked about family history. How my baby pictures began at almost 2 years old, with no hospital bracelet, no newborn photos, no tired smiling parents holding me under fluorescent lights. When I asked, they made me feel unreasonable. When I cried, they made me feel dramatic. When I stopped asking, they called me mature. Now Claire had dragged the secret into the open, and still somehow I was the one being accused of ruining the table. I looked at my mother. Did you tell her to say it? Diane's face hardened immediately, which was answer enough. Don't be ridiculous. Aunt Lila finally spoke from the far end of the table. Her voice was careful, but it cut through the room. Diane, that's not ridiculous. Claire didn't just guess. My mother's eyes snapped toward her. Lila, please. No, Aunt Lila said, softer now, but steadier. You can't let her announce something like that and then act like Maya is the problem. The room shifted again. Tiny movement, shoulders turning, people glancing at each other. The first crack in the wall my parents had spent my entire life building. My father noticed it too. He set down the carving knife with deliberate care, like he wanted everyone to see how controlled he was compared to me. This has become unnecessarily theatrical, he said. Claire spoke out of turn. Maya is hurt. We can discuss it later as a family. As a family? I repeated. I looked at Marlene, who was still sitting between Uncle Mark and my cousin's husband, lips pressed together, but eyes bright. She's family now. Marlene flushed. I only came because Diane invited me. Exactly, I said. My mother inhaled sharply. There was the disrespect. Not Claire exposing my adoption. Not my parents nodding along. Not 20 people watching my face change as I found out how many of them had known or suspected or stayed quiet. The disrespect was me naming the audience they had chosen. Grandma Elise's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. Noah stood halfway from his seat, then sat again, like he couldn't decide whether to intervene or disappear. The turkey sat half-carved in the center of the table, steam fading off the slices. Everything smelled like butter and sage and betrayal. Claire crossed her arms. You always do this, she said. I turned back to her slowly. Do what? Make everyone feel guilty for loving you wrong. The sentence landed in my chest like something blunt. For a moment, I couldn't answer. Not because she was right. Because she had found the cruelest possible way to say what my family had trained me to fear. That maybe my pain was inconvenient. That maybe asking to be loved honestly was too much. That maybe being lied to for 22 years still did not give me permission to disturb dinner. My father seized the silence. Claire, he said, with just enough firmness to seem fair. Then he looked at me. Maya, sit down, put the paper away. We are not doing this in front of everyone. But everyone had already seen me flinch. Everyone had already heard the word adopted. Everyone had already watched my sister turn my identity into a toast, and my parents turn my reaction into misconduct. My hand was still in the air, the folded court page between my fingers. I could feel my pulse in my wrist, fast, hard, louder than my own thoughts. My mother came around the table toward me, each step measured now, her public face sliding back into place. She lowered her voice as she approached, but that only made the words more dangerous. You don't understand what you found, she said. You are confused, and you are hurt, and if you keep going, you will regret it. I looked past her to my grandmother. Grandma Elise was crying silently, not shocked, not confused, ashamed. That was when I knew. This secret had roots. My mother reached for the paper. I stepped back. The chair behind me scraped against the floor so loudly Marlene gasped. No, I said. Diane froze with her hand still extended. My father rose from his seat. Maya, this time, my name sounded like a command. I unfolded the page once, then again. Claire's face went pale as she realized the dinner she had tried to control was slipping away from her. I looked at my parents, and my voice came out low enough that everyone had to lean in to hear it. You waited 22 years to tell me I was adopted, I said. So maybe now you can explain why the court file says my father was Thomas Vale. The name Thomas Vale did not mean anything to everyone at the table. I saw it happen in layers. My cousin Noah frowned, confused, like he was trying to place a name from some old family story he had only half heard. Marlene looked around quickly, hungry for someone else's reaction before deciding on her own. Claire stared at me with her lips parted, all the confidence draining from her face because she could tell, finally, that she had not exposed the biggest secret. She had only opened the door. But my mother knew the name. My father knew the name. My Aunt Lila knew the name. And my grandmother looked like I had just spoken to a ghost seated beside her. No one reached for the food. No one touched their glasses. The candles in the middle of the table kept flickering like nothing had changed, throwing soft light over gravy boats and folded napkins and my mother's perfect holiday centerpiece, while the people around it sat frozen inside a truth that had been waiting 22 years to be said out loud. My mother's hand lowered slowly. Maya, she whispered, not angry this time, afraid. That scared me more than her anger ever had, because my mother's anger was familiar. I knew how to survive it. I knew which silences to use, which apologies to offer, which rooms to leave before she could accuse me of making her look cruel. But fear was different. Fear meant the thing in my hand was real enough to hurt her. My father moved first. He came around the table with that controlled, stiff posture he used when he wanted everyone to believe he was the reasonable one. But his eyes were not reasonable. His eyes were locked on the paper in my hand. Kitchen, he said, one word. Sharp, a command dressed as privacy. I did not move. He stopped 2 chairs away from me. Now, the old part of me almost obeyed. That was the humiliating truth. Even at 29 years old, even after my sister had stood up in front of 20 people and exposed something my parents had hidden from me my entire life, even with the court page shaking in my hand, some trained piece of me still reacted to my father's voice like I was 12 again. Sit down. Smile. Don't embarrass us. Be grateful. Be quiet. I felt that old instinct rise in my throat. Then I looked at Claire. She was watching me with wide eyes. Not sorry, just frightened that her performance had gone too far. She had wanted me small. She had wanted me stunned. She had wanted the table to look at me the way she always looked at me, like I was unstable, difficult, less legitimate somehow. And my parents had let her. They had sat there. They had nodded along. Then they had blamed me for reacting. No, I said. My father's face barely changed, but I saw the muscle jump in his jaw. Aunt Lila drew in a breath. My mother's voice came soft and careful, the way it always did when witnesses were present. Honey, she said, you don't understand those documents. They're complicated. I laughed once. It came out wrong. Small, broken, too sharp for the room. You keep saying that. Diane blinked. You keep saying I don't understand, I said. And my voice thickened despite how hard I fought to keep it steady. You said that when I asked why there were no newborn pictures. You said that when I asked why Dad got angry every time a doctor wanted family history. You said that when I asked why Grandma stopped talking whenever I brought up baby names. You said I was confused before I even knew what I was confused about. My grandmother shut her eyes. Robert stepped closer. Enough. No, Aunt Lila said. The word was quiet, but it stopped him. My father turned his head slowly. Leela, stay out of this. She looked frightened of him. I could see that. Her hands were clenched in her lap. Her mouth trembled before she spoke again. But for the first time all night, someone besides me sounded angry. She has a right to ask. Diane snapped, this is not your place. And Thanksgiving dinner was Claire's place? Aunt Lila asked. Claire flinched like she had been slapped. Good. For 1 second, I hated that I thought that. Then I didn't. Because nobody at that table had flinched for me when she said adopted like a punchline. My father looked around the room, measuring the damage. I had seen him do it at business dinners, at church events, at family gatherings when a conversation moved somewhere he didn't like. He searched faces, counted loyalties, decided which version of himself to perform. Then he lowered his voice. Maya is emotional, he said to the table, not to me. This is exactly why we intended to handle this privately. There it was again, privately. As if privacy had ever been for me. If privacy mattered, Claire would never have lifted that glass. If privacy mattered, Diane would have stopped her before the first sentence left her mouth. If privacy mattered, my father would not have told me not to make a scene while I sat there with my entire identity spilled across the table like a serving dish. You didn't intend to handle it, I said. You intended to keep it buried. Marlene shifted in her seat. Maybe this really should be discussed later. I looked at her. She shrank a little, but not enough. You shouldn't be here, I said. My mother's eyes flashed. Do not be rude to my guest. Your guest watched my sister announce my adoption before I knew who at this table knew the truth, I said. Rude is not the problem. Noah made a sound under his breath. Not quite agreement, not quite shock. Claire grabbed onto it anyway. Oh my God, she said. Listen to yourself. This is what I'm talking about. You always act like everything is being done to you. I turned to her, and for the first time that night, I let her see exactly what she had done. You stood up at Thanksgiving and told a room full of people I was adopted before I had ever heard either of. Our parents say it to me. Her mouth opened, closed. I kept going. You said I should be grateful. You said I couldn't handle the truth. You made sure everyone was watching my face when you said it. Claire's eyes darted to our father. I didn't mean yes, you did. The words came out before I softened them. I was tired of softening everything. You meant to embarrass me, I said. You meant to put me below you. You meant to make me look like the outsider you always implied I was. Her cheeks flushed. That's not fair, I almost smiled. Not fair? That was when my father reached for the paper. Fast. Too fast. His fingers closed around the edge of it, and for a second we were both holding the page between us. The original copy was safe at my apartment. This was only a photocopy. I had told myself that on the drive over, trying to calm down. If they grabbed it, if they tore it, if they denied it, they could not erase what I had already scanned, saved, and sent to myself. But my body did not know that. My body only knew that my father was trying to take my truth away again. I jerked back. The page tore halfway down the crease. Several people gasped. Robert froze, still holding the torn corner. The room had seen it. That mattered. They had seen him lunge for a document about my own life while telling everyone I was the unstable one. Noah stood up fully this time. Uncle Robert, he said, voice tight. Stop. My father turned on him. Sit down. Noah did not sit. His hand moved toward his phone on the table. He didn't lift it openly. He just touched it, slid it closer, thumb moving once across the screen. Robert saw it. So did I. So did Diane. My mother's expression changed again, and this time the fear had calculation inside it. Maya, she said softer. Please. This is painful for everyone. Everyone. The word nearly broke something in me. I looked around at the table, at the faces watching like my pain had become a storm system passing over them. I thought of the basement cabinet, the dust on the folder, the way my name had looked under my mother's neat handwriting. I thought of myself at 17, crying in the car after a doctor asked if breast cancer ran in my family and my mother snapped, "Stop obsessing over things that don't matter." I thought of being 25 and laughing along when Claire said I had main character abandonment issues. Because if I didn't laugh, they would call me dramatic, painful for everyone. But only I had been made to live inside the lie. I unfolded what remained of the page and held it against my chest so they couldn't take it again. The file was in the basement, I said. Behind Dad's tax boxes, locked in the green cabinet, my mother whispered, "You had no right." Aunt Lila stared at her. Diane. I kept my eyes on my parents. There was an original birth certificate, I said. There was an adoption petition. There were attorney letters from Graham Bell's office. And there was correspondence about notification. At the word notification, my father's face went still, not blank, still, the kind of stillness people get when they realize the trap is not in front of them anymore. It already closed. Grandma Elise let out a quiet sob. Claire looked from one adult to another. What notification? Nobody answered her. That was when she finally understood what I had understood upstairs, downstairs, in childhood bedrooms, in doctors' offices, in every silence that arrived too fast. There were levels to what she had announced. There was the adoption. There was the lie. And then there was the reason my parents had hidden the lie so carefully that they would rather let me be humiliated in public than explain it in private. My father's voice became low. That file belongs to us. The words emptied the room. Even Claire stopped breathing for a second, because he had not said it was false. He had not said I misunderstood. He had not said Thomas Vale was a mistake. He had said the file belonged to them. My file, my birth certificate, my origin, my missing medical history, my name before theirs, mine. Noah's phone was on the table now, screen dark but angled upward. I didn't know if he was recording. I hoped he was. I hated that I hoped he was. I hated that my own family had made documentation feel safer than memory. My mother reached for Robert's sleeve. Rob, she whispered, a warning. Too late. Aunt Lila pushed back from the table. Why would you say that? Robert ignored her. He looked only at me. You found something you were never supposed to see, he said. And now you are twisting it because you are angry. I felt the room tilt, not from shock this time, but from recognition. That was the sentence of my life. You found something. You noticed something. You asked something. And now you are the problem. The heat in my face disappeared. My hands went cold. My pulse steadied in a way that felt almost frightening, like my body had finally moved past panic and into something sharper. I turned to Claire. You wanted honesty, I said. She didn't answer. I turned back to my parents. Then let's be honest. My mother shook her head once, small, desperate. My father said, Maya, I am warning you. But the warning did not work anymore. Not in front of everyone. Not with the torn court page in my hand. Not after Claire had already made sure there was an audience. So I looked down at the document, found the line I had memorized 3 weeks earlier, and read the name printed beside biological father. Thomas Adrian Vale, I said. Grandma Elise covered her face. Aunt Leila whispered, oh my God. And Claire, pale now, confused now, finally afraid of the silence she had created, asked, who is Thomas Vale? My mother closed her eyes. My father answered before anyone else could. Nobody, he said. But my grandmother lifted her head, tears running down her face, and said, he was supposed to marry Diane. My grandmother's words did not explode. They sank. That was worse. They dropped into the middle of the Thanksgiving table and pulled every face downward with them. My mother's eyes opened slowly, but she didn't look at Grandma Elise. She looked at Robert. My father stood completely still beside me, one torn corner of my court page still trapped between his fingers. For one strange second, all I could see was that corner. A tiny piece of paper. A ripped edge. My life torn neatly between my hand and his. He was supposed to marry Diane, Grandma had said. Not a stranger. Not an agency name. Not some sad, distant man from a story I was too young to remember. My mother's former fiancé. The room began to move again in pieces. Uncle Mark whispered something under his breath. Aunt Lila pushed her chair back another inch, her face drained. Noah's hand stayed near his phone. Marlene looked as if she wanted to become invisible, and stay visible at the same time, trapped between fear and the hunger to witness something scandalous from close range. Claire stared at our mother. Mom? Diane did not answer her. That silence told me something Claire's announcement had not. My parents had told her just enough to use me, not enough to protect her from what would happen when I used the truth back. Claire's lips parted, and for once, there was no smugness there. No performance. Just the startled panic of someone who had walked into a room, lit a match, and realized the walls were soaked in gasoline. Mom, she said again, smaller. What is Grandma talking about? My mother finally moved. She sat down, not because she was calm, because her knees seemed to give out beneath her. The chair creaked under her, and she pressed one hand to the edge of the table like it was the only solid thing left in the room. Thomas was a long time ago, she said. My laugh came out before I could stop it. Not loud, not happy, just one broken breath. A long time ago? Her eyes snapped to me. Do not use that tone with me. There she was. Even now. Even after my sister exposed me, after my father tried to snatch my file, after my grandmother admitted Thomas Vale had not been some random name in a document, my mother still reached for the oldest weapon she had. My tone. My behavior. My failure to be polite while they took my entire life apart at the dinner table. I looked at her hands, perfect nails, wedding ring. The thin gold bracelet Robert had given her last Christmas while Claire clapped, and I washed wine glasses in the kitchen because Diane said that the dishwasher left spots. I had spent years studying those hands. How they tightened around mugs when I asked the wrong question. How they fluttered toward Claire's hair when Claire cried. How they rested on my shoulder, only in photographs, only when someone else was watching. I wondered if those hands had ever held me as a baby while knowing exactly whose child I was. Was he my father? I asked. The question was plain. Too plain for the room. Diane swallowed. Robert stepped forward. This conversation is over. Aunt Lila stood. No, it is not. My father turned on her so sharply that her shoulders pulled back, but she did not sit. Maya asked a question, Aunt Lila said. And after what happened tonight, Diane owes her an answer. Claire's voice cracked. Why didn't you tell me any of this? I looked at her then, and I realized something that made my anger twist into something colder. Claire still thought this was about her. She had stood up and humiliated me in front of the entire family. She had used my adoption like proof that I was less entitled to love, less entitled to history, less entitled to a place at that table. But the moment the truth widened beyond her control, she reached for her own injury first. Why didn't you tell me? Not Maya, I'm sorry, not I shouldn't have said it. Not I didn't know. Just why wasn't I trusted with a better secret? Diane rubbed her forehead. Claire, please. No, Claire said, voice rising. You told me she was adopted. You said she had been difficult about family things and that if it came out, we had to help her understand it didn't change anything. I went still. There it was. 2 months earlier, Claire had known. Not by accident. Not from some old overheard conversation. Diane had told her. My mother's eyes flashed with warning, but Claire was too upset now to obey it. You said she had always been jealous of me, Claire continued, tears gathering in her eyes, not for me, but for herself. You said if Grandma changed anything in the estate because of Maya's feelings, it would tear the family apart. Grandma Elise lifted her head. What estate? I asked. The room tightened again. Claire looked at me, then at Grandma, and something mean tried to return to her face, but it could not hold. Not fully. The co-executor thing, she said. Grandma naming you with Aunt Lila. Mom said it was because you manipulated her. I blinked. For a moment the words did not connect. I knew Grandma had updated her estate documents. She had asked me to drive her to an attorney's office 6 months earlier because she said she didn't like Robert's accountant. I sat in the waiting room. I didn't ask questions. She bought me coffee afterward and asked if I ever thought about changing careers. That was all. Or I thought it was all. My mother had watched that small errand turn into a threat, so she had told Claire part of the truth. Not because Claire deserved honesty, because Claire could be aimed. Because Claire's jealousy was useful. Because if I looked ungrateful, unstable, dramatic enough in front of everyone, maybe whatever Grandma had done could be questioned later. Maybe my parents could say I had been emotional, volatile, influencing an old woman. Maybe tonight was not just cruelty. Maybe it was strategy. I felt the old room around me rearrange itself. The seating. Claire between my parents. Marlene present. Robert's careful public calm. Diane checking my coat when I arrived. Claire watching me all night, waiting for the moment when everyone had food, wine, warmth, witnesses. They had not only let her announce it, they had prepared the table. You used her, I said to my mother. Diane's mouth tightened. That is disgusting. No, Aunt Lila said, voice shaking now. It sounds accurate, Robert pointed at her. Leela. She ignored him and looked at Grandma Elise. Mom, what did you change? Grandma's breathing was uneven. Her napkin was twisted in both hands, damp where her tears had fallen. I removed Robert from any role in my affairs, she said. Robert's face darkened. And Diane, Grandma added. My mother made a soft wounded noise. Mother. Grandma flinched, but kept going. I named Lila and Maya because I wanted someone honest handling things when I'm gone. The word honest moved through the room like smoke. Claire wiped at her face. So that's why you told me? Diane snapped. I told you because you deserve to know what was happening in your own family. No, I said. You told her because you knew she'd punish me for it. Claire's eyes filled with anger again, but now it looked childish. Cornered. Less like a knife, more like a hand caught holding one. I didn't know about Thomas, she said. And that makes it better? I didn't know, she repeated, louder, as if volume could turn it into an apology. But I was not looking at Claire anymore. I was looking at my mother. Was Thomas Vale my biological father? Diane closed her eyes. Robert answered instead. Biology is not fatherhood. The sentence landed like a slap, because he thought it sounded noble. He thought the room would hear sacrifice. See the man who had stepped in, the man who had raised another man's child, the man who deserved gratitude for giving me his name. But all I heard was ownership. My fatherhood is the only one that counts because I controlled the story. My mother opened her eyes and whispered, yes, one word. Barely spoken. Still I felt it everywhere, in my chest, my throat, behind my eyes, in the hollow place I had carried for years and blamed on myself. Thomas Vale was my father. My biological father. The name in the file was not a mistake. Not a typo. Not some complicated legal misunderstanding my mother could explain away with a soft voice and a trembling hand. He was real. And everyone's reaction told me he had been real to them long before he became real to me. My knees felt weak, but I would not sit down. Sitting felt like surrender. Crying felt like giving them something to judge. So I stood with the torn paper, held against my body, and tried to breathe through the feeling of being born again in the worst possible room. What happened to him? I asked. My mother looked away. Robert said he died years ago. Years ago, a simple phrase, a locked door. My grandmother made a sound that was almost a sob. When? I asked. Nobody answered fast enough. The delay told me I would hate the answer. Aunt Lila whispered, Maya. I turned to her. When? Grandma Elise pressed her fingers to her mouth. When you were 7. The room blurred. 7. I had been alive, not a baby, not a rumor, not some infant placed and lost before memory could form. 7. At 7, I had learned to ride a bike in the driveway while Robert complained I was too dramatic every time I fell. At 7, Diane cut my hair short because she said I cried too much when she brushed it. At 7, Claire was 3, and everyone said I needed to understand she was little, she needed more attention, I needed to be patient. At 7, somewhere outside the life they built around me, Thomas Vale had died, and I had not known he existed. Did he know about me? I asked. My mother's face crumpled for the first time. Robert stepped in immediately. This is not productive, I turned on him. Did he know? His eyes hardened. You were a child. That is not an answer. You had a stable home. That is not an answer. You had parents. That is not an answer. Each sentence sharpened the air. My voice rose, but I did not care anymore. Let Marlene hear it. Let the cousins hear it. Let Claire hear what she had dragged into the center of the table. I looked at Diane. Did Thomas know about me? My mother covered her mouth. For one brief second, she looked young. Not innocent. Just stripped of all the polish she used to make herself untouchable. He knew I was pregnant, she whispered. The room went completely still. He knew, I repeated. Diane shook her head quickly. Not everything. It was complicated. Our families were involved. Your grandfather was furious. Robert and I were trying to start over, and Thomas... And Thomas what? I asked. Robert's voice cut in. Thomas was unstable. Grandma Elise slammed her hand on the table. It was not loud. She was too frail for loud. But it stopped him. No, she said. Robert looked stunned. Grandma's face was wet with tears, but her eyes were suddenly clear. No more of that. Diane whispered. Mother, don't. Grandma Elise pushed herself upright, trembling. For years, I let you say that, she said. Looking at my mother first, then Robert. I let you make him sound reckless, obsessive, dangerous, because it was easier than admitting what we did. My chest tightened. What we did, not what happened, what we did. Noah's phone was definitely recording now. I could see the small red dot reflected faintly in the dark screen from where he had angled it near his plate. Nobody stopped him. Maybe nobody dared. Grandma looked at me, and the grief in her face almost knocked me down. Maya, she said, Thomas tried to find you. My hand closed around the paper so hard the torn edge bent. My mother whispered, please. Grandma kept going. He came back after he heard rumors. He thought Diane had placed you with a family out of state. That was what he was told. That was what we all let him believe. My mouth went dry. Out of state, a stranger family. Not the Hallows. Not Diane raising me under Robert's name. Not me sitting at this table every Thanksgiving while half the adults looked away from questions they knew had answers. He contacted Graham Bell's office, Grandma said, more than once. The attorney from the file, the letters, the notification page. The word that had made Robert go still. My father's face had gone gray with anger. Elise, you are confused. Grandma turned toward him with a strength I had never seen in her. I am old, Robert. I am not confused. The room held its breath. Diane began to cry then, quietly, beautifully, the way she did when she wanted people to soften around her. For a moment, I felt the pull of it. The old instinct to comfort her, to protect her from the consequences of what she had done to me. Then I remembered her hand reaching across the table. Maya, not tonight. Not tonight after 22 years. Not tonight after Claire's announcement. Not tonight after the file. I did not move toward her. What did the letters say? I asked. Grandma shook her head. I don't know all of it. Robert laughed bitterly. Exactly, but I know what Diane asked me to sign, Grandma said. My mother stood again, panic breaking through completely now. Stop. Grandma looked at her daughter and cried harder. I should have stopped 22 years ago. Diane's face twisted. You don't understand what it was like. No, Grandma said. Maya doesn't understand, because we never told her. Claire whispered, what did you sign? Nobody looked at Claire. For once, she was outside the center. Grandma's hands shook so badly, Aunt Lila moved beside her and held one. I signed an affidavit, Grandma said. I said Diane had intended a closed adoption from the beginning. I said Thomas had been notified through proper channels and had not responded. My ears started ringing. The table stretched away from me. The candles blurred. The torn court page became soft under my fingers. Had he responded? I asked. Grandma sobbed once. Diane said, Maya, please understand, had he responded? My mother's tears spilled over. Robert's voice came sharp. Enough. But this time, nobody listened to him. Grandma Elise looked directly at me and said, yes. He begged them to tell him where you were. Yes. He begged them to tell him where you were. For a moment, I couldn't understand how a sentence could be so small and still destroy so much. 7 words. Maybe 8, depending on how my mind grabbed at them. They should have floated away after Grandma said them. They should have become another horrible thing in a horrible dinner, another piece of the room I could look at later and say, that happened. Somehow, that happened. But they didn't float. They lodged. They went straight into the place inside me that had spent years wondering why I felt unwanted in a house full of framed family photos. He begged them. I stared at my grandmother, and I knew she was still talking because her mouth was moving, because Aunt Lila had one hand on her shoulder, because Claire was whispering something like no over and over again. But for a few seconds, all sound thinned. The dining room became a picture behind glass. My mother crying, my father standing rigid beside the table, my sister with her perfect lipstick and ruined expression, the turkey cooling in the middle of everything, and me, holding a torn photocopy of a court page, learning that the man whose name had been hidden from me had not vanished. He had searched, he had asked, he had begged. I swallowed, but my throat felt packed with cotton. Say that again, I whispered. Grandma Elise closed her eyes. Maya, my mother said, voice breaking, please don't make her. Say it again. My own voice surprised me. It was not loud. It was not frantic. It was something worse. It was empty in a way that made the room obey. Grandma opened her eyes. Thomas wrote letters, she said. He called Graham Bell's office. He came to the house once, after he heard from someone that Diane had not gone through with the out-of-state placement. My mother pressed both hands to her mouth. My father said, Elise. Grandma did not look at him. He wanted to know if you were alive, she continued. If you were safe, if Diane had kept you. He said he wasn't trying to take you by force. He said he just wanted the truth. The truth. The word moved through me slowly, not like comfort, like a blade being pulled free. All my life, I had been told truth was dangerous because of me. I was too reactive for it, too fragile, too dramatic, too ungrateful. They had acted like withholding it was mercy. Like every locked drawer and snapped conversation and missing medical answer had been part of some noble protection. But Thomas had asked for the truth too, and they had denied him. Not because he was a child, not because he couldn't handle it, because the truth threatened them. My eyes moved to my mother. Did you read them? Diane lowered her hands. Her face was wet now, makeup gathered beneath her eyes, pearls still bright at her throat. She looked devastated. And some trained, obedient part of me noticed that. The old part of me wanted to protect her from being seen like this. I hated that part. I hated that it still existed. Did you read his letters? I asked again. She shook her head, but not in denial, in surrender. Some. How many, Maya? How many? Robert stepped between us slightly. This is cruel. I looked at him, almost calmly. Cruel? His jaw tightened. You do not get to interrogate your mother at her own table, he said. Her table? Aunt Lila snapped. Robert, sit down. He didn't. Of course he didn't. Robert Hallow had built his entire life on standing between people and the thing they deserved to see. He stood between my mother and consequences, between Claire and accountability, between Grandma and her own decisions, between me and my own name. Now he was trying to stand between me and a dead man's letters, my dead father's letters. I looked past him. Diane, I said, and it was the first time that night I did not call her mom. How many? The word Diane changed her face. It landed harder than any accusation. She blinked like I had taken something from her. Maybe I had. Maybe I was finally taking back the right to decide what she was to me. I don't remember, she whispered. Grandma made a pained sound. Aunt Lila's grip on her shoulder tightened. You do, Grandma said softly. Diane looked at her mother with something almost like betrayal. Don't. You remember, Grandma said, because you kept them. The room stilled again. My hand went cold around the torn page. Kept them where? I asked. Diane was crying harder now. I couldn't throw them away. Robert turned toward her. Diane. She flinched. For the first time all night, I saw the arrangement clearly. My mother had power over me, over Claire, over the soft version of the family story. But Robert had power over the lie itself. He guarded it like a locked safe. He monitored every crack. He decided when voices got too loud, when doors closed, when documents disappeared. And my mother had let him. Because it served her too. Where are they? I asked. No one answered. So I stepped around Robert. He moved to block me, but Noah's voice cut across the room. Don't touch her. Robert turned, stunned. Noah was standing now with his phone in his hand, screen facing down, but there was no pretending anymore. His face was pale, his shoulders tense, but he held his ground. Don't, Noah said again. For a second, Robert looked like he might explode. Then he glanced at the phone, at Marlene, at Aunt Lila, at the relatives who were no longer looking at him like a reasonable patriarch managing a difficult daughter. They were looking at him like a man who had something to hide. He stepped back, small, but enough. I looked at Diane. The letters, I said. Her voice came out so quiet I almost missed it. In the cedar chest, Grandma sobbed. Aunt Lila whispered, Diane, the one in your bedroom? I asked. Diane nodded. My father's face hardened into something flat and ugly. You are not going upstairs. That was the wrong thing to say. Because until then, some people at the table had still been clinging to uncertainty. Maybe they wanted to believe there was an explanation. Maybe they needed time to adjust from Thanksgiving dinner to 22 years of buried records. Maybe they wanted to think Robert was harsh but overwhelmed. But when he said I could not go upstairs to retrieve letters from the man named as my biological father, after my sister had exposed me in public, after my mother admitted the letters existed, the room shifted fully. Noah lifted his phone. Aunt Lila stood beside me. Grandma Elise, shaking so badly she could barely move, pushed herself upright too. I'll get them, Grandma said. Diane whispered, Mother, please. Grandma looked at her daughter with a grief so old it had become part of her bones. You made me sign a lie, she said. I will not help you keep the rest of it. Then she walked out of the dining room. Slowly. Aunt Lila went with her. No one spoke while they were gone. That silence was different from the first one. The first silence had watched me bleed. This one watched my parents. Claire sat down hard, her chair creaking beneath her. She looked at me and I waited for something. An apology. A real one. A sentence that belonged to what she had done. Instead, she wiped her cheeks and whispered, I didn't know it was like this. I stared at her. That was the closest she could get. Not I'm sorry I humiliated you. Not I'm sorry I called you ungrateful. Not I'm sorry I stood up at Thanksgiving and made your life a performance. Just I didn't know it was like this. You knew enough, I said. Her face crumpled, partly from hurt, partly from anger, partly because she was used to being forgiven before she had to understand. My mother reached toward her. Claire pulled away. It was tiny, but Diane felt it. I saw that too. The golden child had been given a weapon and cut her own hand on it. A few minutes later, Grandma and Aunt Lila came back. Grandma held a bundle tied with a faded blue ribbon. Not dramatic, not hidden inside a metal box, just paper, letters. A stack thick enough to make my knees weak. Diane made a sound like she was going to be sick. Robert said, those are private. Nobody moved. Grandma placed them on the table in front of me. My fingers hovered over the ribbon. I did not open them immediately. I was afraid of wanting them too much. Afraid of what his handwriting would do to me. Afraid that after 29 years of imagining a blank space, I would find a person there and then have to grieve him all at once. The top envelope was yellowed at the edges. My mother's maiden name was written across the front in firm blue ink, Diane Mercer. I stared at the letters until the words blurred. Then I untied the ribbon. The first letter unfolded with a soft crackle. My hands shook as I read, Diane, I need you to answer me directly. I heard from Martin that you may have kept the baby. If that is true, I am not writing to punish you. I am writing because I have a right to know my child is safe. If you placed her, tell me where. If you kept her, tell me that. I will not disappear just because your family prefers silence. My breath stopped. My child. Not the baby. Not the situation. My child. I pressed the page flat with both hands. There were more lines, but tears distorted them. I blinked hard, refusing to let the words vanish. You do not have to marry me. You do not have to forgive me. But do not erase me from her life, because it is easier for Robert. The room disappeared again. Robert. Thomas had known. Not everything, maybe. Not where I slept. Not what name was on my school forms. Not how many birthdays passed with him outside the door of my life. But he had known enough to name the man helping erase him. I looked up. Robert's face was stone. Diane was crying into her napkin. Did you answer him? I asked. My mother could not speak. Grandma did. No. I looked back down. The next letter was dated 6 months later. Then another. Then one from when I would have been 4, 6. Then almost 7. Each one had pieces of a father trying not to sound desperate and failing. He asked if I liked books. He asked if my hair had stayed dark. He asked whether I had Diane's eyes. He asked whether anyone had told me his name. Then, near the bottom of the last letter, the writing changed, less controlled, pressed harder into the page. I spoke to Bell's office again. They said there is no record I am entitled to access. That cannot be right. Diane, if Robert is involved in this, tell him I will not be managed away from my own daughter. My own daughter. The words split me open. I folded over the letter without meaning to. One hand pressed to my mouth, the other still gripping the paper. A sound came out of me then. Not a sob exactly. Something rawer, smaller, like a child's first breath after being held underwater. No one told me to calm down. No one said I was making a scene. Not this time. My mother whispered, I was scared. I lifted my head. That sentence found no soft place in me. You were scared? She nodded quickly, desperate now that she had found an explanation with feeling in it. My father was furious. Thomas's family was threatening legal action. Robert and I were newly married, and everything was unstable, and I thought if I let Thomas in, he would take you, or use you, or pull us into court. I thought I was protecting you. I waited for the old reflex, the one that would make me consider her fear before my own loss. It did not come. You let me grow up thinking I was hard to love, I said. Diane recoiled. You let me think every missing answer was because I was too much. You let Dad shut me down when doctors asked about family history. You let Claire call me dramatic for feeling like something was wrong. And tonight, you let her stand up in front of everyone and tell me I was adopted like I was supposed to thank you for the humiliation. Claire started crying again. I did not look at her. You were not protecting me, I said. You were protecting the version of yourself that got to keep me and erase him. Robert's voice cut in, cold and final. We raised you. I turned to him. There it was, the last defense, the invoice, food, shelter, school, a name, a bedroom, Christmas gifts, dental appointments, college help with interest attached in the form of obedience. We raised you, he repeated. Whatever Diane did before I came into the picture, I gave you a home. You gave me a home where I was punished for noticing I didn't know who I was. His eyes narrowed. You are being intentionally cruel. No, Noah said from behind his phone. She's telling the truth. Robert turned on him. You have no idea what you're talking about. I know I recorded you saying her file belonged to you, Noah said. The room went sharp. Robert's mouth closed. My mother looked at Noah's phone as if it had become a loaded gun. Marlene stood abruptly, chair scraping behind her. I think I should go. Nobody stopped her. But she did not leave before hearing Aunt Lila say clearly, Diane, Robert, this needs a lawyer. My father laughed once. For what? Grandma Elise answered. For the affidavit, she said. For the letters. For whatever Robert did with Graham Bell's office. For my estate documents if you try to challenge them after this. Robert's face changed. There. Not fear exactly. Calculation. The same look my mother had worn earlier when she realized Claire had said too much. The same look people get when pain no longer matters because paperwork has entered the room. I placed Thomas's letters back on the table carefully. They're coming with me, I said. No, Robert said immediately. Aunt Lila stepped forward. Yes, they are. Diane whispered, Maya, please don't take them. They're all I have left of that time. I looked at her then, really looked. And the strangest thing happened. I did not hate her in that moment. Hate would have been simpler, cleaner, a fire I could stand inside. What I felt was colder, wider, grief maybe. Not just for Thomas, not just for myself, but for the version of my mother who had made a choice, then spent the rest of my life feeding that choice until it became bigger than all of us. You had them for 22 years, I said. I had nothing. Her face collapsed. I gathered the letters, the torn court page, the envelope with my original birth certificate copy. My hands were still shaking, but my movements were careful, almost tender. Nobody reached for them, not even Robert. Noah stayed close as I stepped away from the table. Aunt Lila touched my arm lightly, not stopping me, just letting me know I was not alone. Grandma Elise sat back down like standing had taken every ounce of strength she had, but her eyes stayed on me. I'm sorry, she said. It was not enough. It could never be enough. But it was plain. No defense, no explanation, no demand, just sorry. That made it different from everything my parents had offered. Claire stood suddenly. Maya, she said. I stopped at the dining room doorway. She looked younger than 26 now, smaller without the table watching her perform. Her mascara had smudged beneath one eye. I really didn't know about Thomas, she said. I nodded once. Not forgiveness, acknowledgement. You still knew it would hurt me, I said. She looked down. That was the answer. Outside, the cold hit me so hard I almost couldn't breathe. The porch light buzzed above me. Through the front window, I could see the distorted shapes of my family still gathered around the table. No one eating. No one pretending the night could be saved. For the first time in my life, I left before cleaning up. I sat in my car with Thomas's letters on the passenger seat and my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. I did not drive right away. I couldn't. The house behind me glowed warm and golden the way it always had from the street. Anyone passing would have thought it looked beautiful, safe, full of family. I knew better now. Maybe I always had. The next morning, Aunt Lila called before 9. Not Diane, not Robert, not Claire, Aunt Lila. She said Noah had saved the recording. She said Grandma wanted me to have copies of everything. She said she had already contacted the attorney who handled Grandma's updated estate documents because Robert had called twice before breakfast, asking whether Maya's emotional instability affected her ability to serve as co-executor. There it was. The punishment after the exposure, predictable, immediate, almost comforting in its consistency. They had let Claire humiliate me at Thanksgiving, blamed me when I refused to sit quietly inside the shame, and by morning my father was already trying to turn my reaction into evidence. But this time, there were witnesses. This time, there was a recording. This time, there were letters. By the end of the week, I met with an attorney of my own. I brought the court file copies, the torn page, photographs of the cedar chest letters, and Noah's recording. The attorney did not promise fireworks. Real life rarely works like that. But she did say there were questions worth asking. About the affidavit. About whether Thomas Vale had been deliberately misled. About whether anything connected to his estate had been affected by the concealment of a biological child. A biological child. Me. For days, I repeated that phrase in my apartment like learning a language. Not because biology fixed anything. Not because Thomas became perfect in death. But because the truth had weight, shape, a name. 2 weeks later, Grandma signed a statement with her attorney present. Aunt Lila witnessed it. She described the affidavit, the pressure, the letters, the fact that Thomas had contacted the family and Graham Bell's office before he died. Diane called me 7 times that day. I did not answer. Robert left one voicemail. His voice was calm, cold, and familiar. You are hurting your mother to satisfy your need for drama. I saved it. Not because it hurt me less, because proof mattered now. Marlene, of all people, became part of the fallout without me lifting a finger. She told someone from Diane's church committee that Thanksgiving had been deeply troubling. In Marlene's language, that meant catastrophic. Within a month, my mother stepped down from 2 committees she had treated like extensions of her identity. Robert's business partner heard pieces through family channels after Noah refused to delete the recording. I never posted it online. I did not need a crowd of strangers to punish them. The people whose opinions they had spent years worshipping saw enough. That was worse for them. Private exposure would have let them manage the story. Public humiliation had been their weapon. Public accountability became the consequence. Claire texted me once. I'm sorry it came out that way. I stared at that sentence for a long time. That way. As if the problem had been delivery. As if adoption secret at Thanksgiving was just poor timing. Not a choice she had made with a wineglass in her hand and an audience waiting. I typed 3 different responses, deleted all of them. Finally, I wrote, you used my life to hurt me. I'm not discussing this until you can say that plainly. She did not reply. That told me what I needed to know. My mother tried a different approach. She mailed me baby photos I had never seen before. Not newborn ones. Nothing that early. But pictures from when I was maybe 2, sitting on a yellow blanket in the backyard, hair sticking up, one fist around a wooden block. On the back, in Diane's handwriting, was written, Maya, Summer. No last name. I cried when I saw them. Then I put them in a folder with Thomas's letters. Both things could be true. She had held me. She had lied. She had kept photos. She had kept letters from the father searching for me. She had loved me in ways that did not excuse the ways she harmed me. That was the hardest part to carry. Not the villain version. The human version. The one that forced me to stop asking whether my childhood had been real and start admitting that real things can still be built on theft. Months passed. The legal process moved slowly, in the dry language of petitions and records requests and estate inquiries. There was no instant courtroom confession, no dramatic judge slamming a gavel, just documents, calls, certified copies, names being corrected in places where they had been hidden too long. But my life changed faster than the paperwork. I changed my emergency contact from Diane to Aunt Lila. I moved the last boxes I had stored in my parents' garage. I stopped attending Sunday dinners where my absence was treated as cruelty and my presence as surrender. And one morning, while filling out a work form, I paused at the line that asked for my full name, Maya Hallow. The name sat there, familiar and heavy. I thought about Thomas's handwriting, my child, my own daughter. I thought about the girl I had been, trying to earn warmth in a house where gratitude was demanded more often than love was offered. Then I typed Maya Vale Hallow. Not because I had solved myself. Not because a name could repair 29 years. Because for the first time, I was allowed to choose what pieces of the truth stayed attached to me. The next Thanksgiving, I did not go to my parents' house. I hosted dinner in my apartment instead. 6 people came: Aunt Lila, Noah, Grandma Elise, 2 friends from work, one neighbor who had nowhere else to go and brought terrible store-bought pie that we all ate anyway. There were no assigned seats, no speeches, no tests disguised as blessings, no secrets waiting behind someone's smile. Grandma brought a small envelope with her. Inside was a photograph of Thomas Vale at 28, standing beside a lake, sleeves rolled to his elbows, looking slightly away from the camera like someone had called his name. I stared at him for a long time. I searched his face for mine and found enough to make my chest ache. His eyebrows. Maybe his mouth. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything, Grandma said. He would have wanted to know you. I did not answer right away. Outside my apartment window, the evening had gone blue and cold. Inside, Noah was laughing in the kitchen because Aunt Lila had dropped a spoon into the mashed potatoes. Someone asked where I kept extra napkins. The table was mismatched. The chairs were borrowed. The turkey was slightly dry. It was the safest Thanksgiving I had ever had. My phone lit up beside my plate. Mom. For a second, everyone seemed to feel it, even though no one had heard the buzz but me. I turned the screen over. Then I turned it back. The message preview sat there, waiting. You've punished us enough. Come home. I looked at those words until they stopped pulling at me. Come home. As if home was still a place where my sister could announce my adoption secret at Thanksgiving and my parents could blame me for bleeding in front of the guests. As if home was the house that hid my file. As if home was the table where everyone expected me to swallow the truth quietly so dinner would not get cold. I picked up the phone. My thumb hovered over the message. Then I blocked the number. Not forever, maybe. Maybe one day there would be a conversation with rules, witnesses, honesty. Maybe one day Diane would say the words without reshaping them around herself. Maybe Claire would learn the difference between regret and accountability. Maybe Robert would never change at all. But that night, I did not owe any of them a doorway back into me. I set the phone face down. Grandma watched me from across the table, tears in her eyes, but she did not ask what I had done. No one did. No one demanded the performance. No one told me to be grateful. No one called me dramatic for protecting the part of myself they had spent years trying to manage. I picked up the carving knife. For 1 second, the memory of my father's hand around the Thanksgiving turkey flashed through me. His warning. His control. His voice saying, "Don't make a scene." Then Noah slid the platter toward me and said, gently, "Whenever you are ready." I looked around my small apartment, at the people who had chosen truth over comfort, at Thomas's photograph resting near the candles, at the empty chair that no longer felt like a wound but a place I could fill however I wanted, and I carved the turkey myself. When Aunt Lila asked if I wanted to say anything before we ate, I almost laughed. A toast would have been too easy. A speech would have given the night back to them somehow. So I just lifted the first slice onto Grandma's plate, then Noah's, then my own. And when my phone buzzed again from some blocked place it could no longer reach, I didn't look down. I said, "Not tonight."